Welcome back to my studio. My name's Elizabeth Bostic, and today we are painting these pretty surprise lilies. I am so excited about them. The colors we will be using today are ultramarine blue, bright green, cadmium yellow light, and madder rose. The brush I'm using first is a size 12 round brush. I'm doing a little initial sketch where I draw a little, almost like a V shape towards the top, and I go a little bit over halfway for this. And then I bring those stem lines all the way down, but not to the very bottom of the page, but pretty close. And I have them crisscrossed as I was looking in my neighborhood today at all the surprise lilies that are popping up. And I saw the cutest pair that looked just like this. So after you're happy with your lines, you can take a kneaded eraser. If you don't have a kneaded eraser yet, I highly suggest one, as they're very gentle to your paper. Lighten up the lines so you can still see them, but just barely. Then I dip my brush in the water and put a good amount of that madder rose on my brush. And then I'm going to put down a dot of a little circle of the paint, a little dot of madder rose for each of the flowers that we're going to be painting in. So I have 4 dots on the bottom and 1 up at the top. Then I'm rinsing the paint off of my brush, and using just the water, I'm going to be going into that dot of paint and pulling it out with just the water so that the paint follows the water and makes this really pretty wet on wet blended look in the petal. And I do this for the 3 petals that I'm painting here, and you can see it's kind of a trumpet look like the lilies have. So I have the 3 petals that you can see, and then I go to the next flower and I'm doing the same thing where I have most of the paint is washed off the brush, wash off a little more if it looks a little too dark, and then I'm going into that dot of color, that little petal of color, and pulling out some of that color with the paintbrush with just water on my brush. And now for that 3rd flower, I'm doing that again, where I'm just pulling out that paint with the water on my brush. And everything is very flowy. It's not detailed. It's almost cloud-like. And I'm really having a lot of fun with that in this painting. So for that 4th flower, you're going on top of those petals that you've already painted, and that's okay. You're creating almost an abstract cloud with all these petals, so don't worry about how they look. And then for that last 5th flower, the same way as that 1st flower, where it's more of a trumpet look, where you are pulling those petals out, up and out towards the side. And then I'm going ahead and adding a few more petals in, just wherever I see it looks like maybe too big of a gap, as I want it to look like it's full of flowers, where I have 2 of the surprise lilies together. I think each has like 5 or 6 flowers, so it's a whole, almost like a bouquet of surprise lilies. So once you're happy with your oval cloud of lilies, you wash off your brush, go into that yellow, and I'm dabbing in, let's see, I have 5 little puddles of yellow that are then going to dry kind of willy-nilly into the petals. And as you can see, I dried off my brush and I'm soaking up just a little bit of that yellow because I thought it was just a little bit too much for that lily, that it was kind of edging in a little too far to the left into that petal. But I could have left it to dry as it was. I think it looks great. However you do it, it will look very different from mine. You'll all get your own unique cloud of surprise lilies. Now I made a little puddle of the green. I washed all of the pink and the yellow off my brush, made sure it was ready to go into the green pan of paint. I pulling the green down right from the edge of that petal. As you can see, I not quite touching it. I do end up touching it in the end and letting that stem color kind of blend into the petal. But for now, while everything is so super wet, I didn't want really a brown with the green and the pink together. But if you don't mind that, go ahead and let them touch, let the colors blend in together. I kept mine just right on the edge, so it was just a tiny bit of a blend on that one little bit of a petal. But when I go in and I add the blue on top of the green that I've just put in for the stems, I do have it touch just a little bit, as the blue and the pink together, they make a violet or purple. So I think to my eye that looks more appealing with these surprise lilies. There are even some surprise lilies that have more of a violet in them. I think they're just gorgeous. Now I'm also adding a bit of that blue to the base of the stems just to give the bottom of the painting some weight, as that green wasn't quite dark enough to have enough weight at the bottom of the painting. So you can add just more green, you can have darker stems where you don't have to go back into it. But I just put a little bit of shadow with the blue. And then you can see where that blue is blending into that very bottom petal. So you can see a little bit of that kind of like a cloudy effect it has with the wet on wet blending. Now I've grabbed my number 2 round brush for the tiny little details. I think they're called the stamen in the surprise lilies. But you can see how when you hold your brush at a very 90-degree up and down angle, it's more of a thinner line. And when you hold it at more of, let's say, a 40-degree angle, it's a thicker line. So play around with the lines of your brush, get it to the thickness that you want, and maybe practice on a separate piece of paper. You can also draw these in pencil first, and then very carefully trace your pencil with your little tiny brush. But sometimes it's fun to have that just free form. You just kind of cross your fingers and hope it comes out right kind of look. So that's what I went with. I'm just doing little swoops down and then a little dot on the top for the stamen. I found there are different types of surprise lilies, but this type in particular that I see around in my neighborhood is a very, like a pale pink with a bit of a yellow center. And then they have these long swooping stamens that come out from the center. And they just add a bit of pizzazz, a bit of fun, a bit of whimsy to the painting. And I just love this part of it. But it is a bit nerve-wracking as they are small details. And even though I've painted for forever, I still get a bit nervous sometimes when I paint. I find myself holding my breath. I have to remind myself to breathe sometimes. And then other times I'm just so deeply into it. It is so relaxing. I'm not thinking of any other problems or anything else in my life except for focusing on the painting in front of me. And it feels almost meditative, and even the repetition of the strokes really helps me to relax at the same time. If you find that you're having a bit of a water control issue, if your little dots for the stamens are too big of puddles or your lines are too thick, you can dab your brush off onto your paper towel, which will take away most or some of that water that's on your brush, and that way you'll have an easier time controlling that line and controlling the size of those little dots. You can see here I do make a mistake, which at least in my mind it was a mistake. the little stamen that I painted, I thought it was just too thick, so I'm going over it with clean water and trying to pick it up. But this color, the Madder Rose, is hard to pick back up off of the paper. So it does leave a bit of a cloud behind, which I don't mind. It just looks like maybe it's part of the petal. But once it's dry, and I did not wait long enough, I would wait about 10 minutes to paint back into it, just to be sure that it's bone dry before you try again on top of an area where you've picked up the paint, just so you're not creating a little cloud of pink. But once it's dry, you can just paint back over that area again. And I think adding the two little stamen there hit it pretty well. I'm happy with it. I'm adding just a last little detail, last little stamen. Well, I think it looks pretty balanced. And when I said the stems needed more weight, I meant they just needed a little bit more of a darker color down towards the bottom so that the flower looks balanced within the painting. And I think this painting does a pretty good job of that. I had so much fun painting these surprise lilies. They are popping up everywhere in my neighborhood, and I could not be happier to see them. I hope that you get the chance to paint them for yourself, and I'll see you next time.